Welcome, friends. Good evening, and delighted to be here with you tonight to enjoy yet another mystery wine blind tasting. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are here, please chime in and let me know that you're with us. And we will begin to evaluate this little number. Oof, it's got quite a profile. Right out of the glass, very expressive. Quite a unique wine. I'm already puzzling that. I'm sorry. The introduction portion of this evening was almost halted by the aromas that are jumping out of that glass. They just got just a moment before I pressed the go live button, and there's a whole series of aromas that I can't quite place, but that are really in. So Veronica and Dan, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm getting ahead of myself because those aromas are so pronounced. As everybody who's been here before knows, we kind of work our way through visual to something, then aroma based, and then finally to taste and evaluation. But the aroma is pronounced. It wafted my way as I poured the wine, and then as I stuck my nose in the glass just to check it out, it's very pronounced. So, Melanie and Kelly, good evening. Welcome. So excited to have you with us as well. Are you smelling quite a bit? Both Veronica, Dan, Melanie, Kelly. Did you get a lot of aroma that just jumped out of the wine? If you've just opened it, perhaps, or perhaps you had it open for a while. Some people enjoy it kind of with their dinners or for an hour or so before we get started. I think that's the case with a lot of folks I talk to. They definitely take their time with the wine prior to us actually tasting it. Rebecca and Karen, good evening. Welcome to you. Excited to have you with us too. So we're going to get underway. It looks like we've got a few more people kind of chiming in, which is great. Taylor, hi. Minus Kristen and Johnny. Well, they've had a number of runs, and perhaps they can watch this on recording and enjoy it. And if you didn't know that, you can do that certainly. So if you can't play along and you want to still enjoy the experience of kind of drinking the wine along with tasting, evaluating the wine along with the presentation that happens on Thursday night, you can always go back and watch the saved version too. And while you can't kind of comment in real time, you can comment to yourself and read the comments and go that way. Definitely distinct aroma coming out for you guys. Good, yeah. And Adrian, welcome. Thank you for joining us on your first time. We'll walk you through this process. It's not a terribly formal one, but it has a structure to it. And like I mentioned just as we began, we generally begin with looking at the wine and determining a whole number of things about the wine before we even smell the wine, and then before for sure we even taste the wine. And we know a whole bunch about this wine just based on its appearance, and that's what's kind of exciting about this blind tasting format. It's a deductive process. So we take an assessment of the wine by way of a couple of key factors in the wine and then use that to rule certain things out. Case in point, from a visual standpoint, this is probably not Sauvignon Blanc, right? It's not a champagne, sparkling wine. There's a whole host of things we can rule out, and by deducing and deducting, you can take away a certain number of things, and that chips away at the world of wine to leave you with a relatively smaller subset to kind of select from. And as a result, you get a pretty good chance at guessing the wine right, and that's usually what we're trying to do. We're not trying to zone in on something we've already tried and say, I think I know this wine is X. Even if you do know that, you just flag that kind of thought in order to be able to then work your way through this deductive process to arrive at maybe the same conclusion, but not to necessarily get trapped in that initial conclusion. So let's begin. What do you see when you look at this wine? What kind of viscosity does it have? Does it have one that results in, as you swirl this, does it result in one that creates sheets that run down it, ones that create little tears that form, and then legs that stay prominently that way? Is the wine deep in color? Is it rich? Is it purple? Or is it perhaps more reddish in color? And is there a variation between the outside rim of the wine? When you tilt the wine like this and look at it over, say, a white piece of paper, like I have here, is there a variation between the outside rim here and the interior portion. All of these things tell you stuff about the wine and potentially where it's coming from and the varietal that it might be made from, or varietals. So when I swirl it, it's starting to form a little lip where the wine has reached its top point. It's not, I gotta say, it's slow to form any tears or really then hold up any legs. Wow, real slow. So it's just starting for me now. Okay. That's very interesting, right? Oh, I got a couple more. I think it's the light here that's not showing me that as well. Yeah, I've got some now. So some tears have formed, and as they run down, it's hard for me to show you this on video, but there's a tear that is formed and run down, and then there's a leg that stays there for a minute. The thicker, the slower that the tears run down, it creates sort of a viscous kind of profile to the wine. That viscosity generally comes from a higher alcohol wine, a wine that has perhaps some residual sugar, a wine that, generally speaking, you might think of coming from a warmer site, maybe a warmer region altogether, or perhaps a site or a vintage that was warmer within maybe a cooler place. So if you start to build a profile, the appearance doesn't always tell you exactly what the wine is going to be, but it really starts to give you a pretty strong inclination. And Robert, thank you for that. Yeah, slow syrupy tears. I'm getting the same thing. They're very slow. And then they hold. And then clear pale, which is kind of contrary to one another. Clear and pale oftentimes don't associate with something that is pretty viscous, syrupy. Because clear and pale generally would be a thinner skinned varietal that would be coming in a way from a cooler place potentially, and doesn't necessarily have a high weight of alcohol. That's not always the case, but that's just a general rule of thumb. And so looking at this wine and seeing those syrupy kind of slow tears, I'm thinking it has higher alcohol, or maybe some residual sugar. Maybe this has some sweetness to it, but that clear pale indication of color, and it's reddish in color, would make me think that it's not something that's going to be sweet. We've got to figure that out. Candy's hinting at where we're headed next by way of the aroma. And it is. There's all kinds of barn things. There's hay, there's fresh grass, I'm getting ahead of myself there, but yeah, it's musty, a little bit of funk to it for sure, and it has that reddish color. So as you're looking at this to round out the visual appearance, anything different about the rim to the center? Getting just a slight variation there, but it's not so much a color variation as there is a wateriness, sort of a light water rim. This little rim is also called the meniscus. So that meniscus has a little bit of wateriness, which is another indication that we're talking potentially about something that has higher alcohol. And that goes hand in hand with the visual observation that we have these tears that formed and moved slowly down and then held a pretty persistent leg. So yeah, Karen, I agree. So it's got that clear rim. So building a profile so far, right, just off of appearance, the nose we said was pretty expressive, and we'll get to that in a minute, but if we took that out of the equation and hadn't smelled the wine, just by looking at it, it's a lighter presentation of wine, so maybe a thinner skinned expression of grape, so not so much, say, Tannat as compared to, say, Pinot Noir, but it has a higher profile of potential alcohol by the indicators of the tears legs and watery meniscus. So we could be in a warmer site, warmer place. We'll have to see. So let's smell the wine. When you're smelling the wine and when you're tasting the wine, you're looking for a few things: fruit, earth, and wood. If you can remember to look for a few things, and that helps you kind of structure what you're looking for. And sometimes you need that structure to sort of pull things out and focus. Other times, like this wine, it's pretty expressive and you just kind of have to start grabbing what you get as they jump out of the glass. And so we've talked about sort of more of the earthen elements in the way of that barnyardy element. From the fruit standpoint, are you picking up any fruit? Anybody picking up fruit? When you're thinking about fruit, You can also break the fruit down into different categories. Are you picking out citrus fruit? Lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruit. Are you picking out tree fruit? Things that grow on trees, apples and pears. Are you picking out stone fruit? Things that have pits, apricots, um, peaches, nectarines, things of that sort. Are you picking up tropical fruits like pineapple, for example, something like that, guava? Um, you could pick up cherry and berries beyond that. So is the cherry kind of light and red? Is it darker black cherry? Are you picking up plums, things of that sort, blackberries and currants? And so you have this whole spectrum of fruit. And then you ask yourself the follow-up question after the fruit: what state or what condition is that fruit in? Is it underripe? Is it fresh, like right on the vine or on the tree? Is it oozing and juicy and very sweet? Is it something that has perhaps been kind of cooked and made sweeter like a jam? Is it something that's dried and raisinated and has a sweetness, but with a kind of transformation of fruit flavor? So, what state is the fruit in? Adrian, I agree. I understand your profile. We got a lot more expression coming out of the nose that's not quite fruited. But Karen's picking up a little bit of raisiny stuff in the way of prunes. Plums are there, a slight bit of cherry and berries coming from Taylor. And I love your note there, Robert, because I agree with it. There's a medicine or medicinal quality to some of the fruit here. Cough drop, cough syrup, that goes with some of an herbal quality that's here. Um, Sometimes that's a factor of whole cluster pressing. So when you pick the grapes, you're not necessarily taking the grapes off of the actual stem. You're pressing the whole cluster, which can result in some of this medicinal element. Also can result in the color being a little bit lighter. Um, I'm getting that kind of medicinal fruit. I'm also getting sort of like fruit leather. When you pull fruit leather off of whatever paper or plastic it's in, there's sort of this aroma that's captured there, and I get that on the nose here. Raspberry cough drop, that's fantastic. It's a good note. So from that standpoint, we're getting some fruit. Earth, we talked about hay and barnyard, things of that sort. Um, and then the wood side of things isn't necessarily that you smell wood, although you can. Sometimes you can pick up notes of cedar, but principally the oak that wines are aged in is oak, and you don't necessarily smell oak. What you're smelling is the representation of that oak in the wine by way of typically spices. And that's because they take the oak staves and make them into a barrel and usually toast those oak staves and do it a light toast, a medium toast, a heavy toast, and everything in between, kind of variations of light to medium. And different coopers do it different ways. When you toast something, you are burning the proteins that are there and burning the sugars, caramelizing, or the Maillard reaction to, and creating an expansion of those flavors. So think about table sugar versus sort of a flan or creme brulee. The dimension of flavor can add something quite unique to the preparation, and that's what's happening with barrel aging or wood aging of a wine, and you get that wood signature. It's not so much that you're smelling wood, but you're getting the elements of wood. So any spices coming out here, sometimes you'll get holiday spices, cloves, sometimes cinnamon. From American oak, you might pick up a little bit of dill. You might get a vanillin quality too. You could pick up cedar, cigar box, things of that sort. I'm not picking up a ton. Doesn't have a major oak signature, but it's certainly present, like perhaps more hiding in that sort of herbal element, which I think might be more about the fruit and the fermentation than it is about the wood. But let's see. The only other thing to note before we go into the taste is, from the variation of color from the middle to the edge, you might also pick up a little bit of browning on the outside rim if this wine were aged. And it doesn't appear to have that, so I would say it looks relatively youthful. So let's taste the wine. And what you're doing with your first taste first maybe 2 or 3 tastes actually, is to try to assess the tastes as opposed to the flavors. And by that I mean, where does this sit on the palate? Is it rich and robust? Is it pretty high in acidity or low in acidity? Where does the alcohol level sit? Is it something that makes you kind of have a retronasal burn? Do you feel like a little heat in the mouth, or is it really light and easy? Um, where are the tannins at? Are they structured and powerful, or are they something that are non-existent and they can absolutely be in the middle? The more that the answers to those questions are in the middle, the less you know about this wine. There's a greater range of opportunity and possibility, but the more you can kind of begin to chip away at some of those notes, it helps to create, again, that profile that we're going to use to make our final guess. So is this wine light in profile, medium in profile, or heavy in profile? For those that have done this before, we talk, of course, about skim milk, whole milk, and 2% in the middle. So when you have this wine in your mouth, does it feel like, is the texture in your mouth like skim milk, like 2% milk, or like whole milk? I'd say it's a lighter wine. It's got high acid, um, a little bit of tannin, right? So yes, your notes are here too, Karen's noting that it's a lighter bodied wine. High acid feels like lots of tannin, but it's fine tannin, very thin tannin, but not super sharp. It's in the skim milk place. Yep, Julie, thank you for that. It's interesting to have kind of that light skim milk profile with something that has a nice amount of tannin and can give you something that has potentially high alcohol. Um, Alcohol, in terms of perception, can be probably most obviously noted on the back of your throat, in the back of your throat. Almost after the sip, your retronasal, your breath next. Do you get a little burn there? And do you have a little heat? You take a shot of vodka or whiskey or tequila, and you get that kind of little bit of burn. Higher alcohol wines won't be the same level. They're not the same level of alcohol as those shots would be, but you get a little bit more warmth. And I'm getting a hint of that, so there's a little bit of warmth there. Moldy apricot. Wow, Candy, what a note. Old fruit. Yeah, it's not in great condition. Okay. A newer wine. I agree with that note. But it is. It's got density, kind of weight from that alcohol, but it's much more like that kind of cough syrup thing we're talking about with the medicinal quality of flavor. But we're also talking about something that's just like the fruit is being transported by the alcohol, as opposed to giving you the impression that you're drinking more of a rich kind of extract of fruit. If that makes sense. Or a fruit juice, I should say. The extract would be something that would happen in the alcohol. So, Taylor, I appreciate the parsing of the note. It's not skim, but it's not 2%. We're in the 1% category, and I think that's accurate. Yeah, it's not thin, and it's not thin like skim milk, largely because I think of the alcohol here, and some of that tannin, which is giving you a little bit more grip. This isn't like we've had, say, Petit Verdot, or we've had some Malbecs from Cahors. We've had thick, rich, chewy, powerful wines that have much more viscosity in the mouth, and much more volume in the mouth. This isn't that. This is kind of sinewy, racy, with that acid that still almost making you pucker. It's medium plus, it's high. Sylvia's throwing out the idea of Cabernet Franc. This is where you can start to throw out ideas with respect to varietals you should consider. You don't have to rush to say, I think I know it's Cabernet Franc, but you could say, what varietals present themselves in this way? Cabernet Franc being potentially one. I would throw into the mix something like Carignan or Cinsault, some kind of Southern Rhone presentation. This color in particular could also be like Nebbiolo with some of that tannin expression. the color alone could give you Pinot Noir, but I don't know that we're in that camp with the alcohol and with the presentation. Adrian's echoing those comments in terms of Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo. I think there's something to consider with respect to Nebbiolo there. Candy, interesting note. Thank you. So it doesn't have really an old world structure. It does have the acid, has a little bit of the tannin, but thinking more of a newer vineyard from a non-traditional place in the New World. So like an up-and-coming kind of emerging wine region, you're thinking, or more like, say, somewhere in California, but making a non-traditional varietal, perhaps. Maybe we're talking about Nebbiolo. And as I swirl this a bit more, we're at 20 minutes. This wine always changes at 20 minutes. Or all wines seem to change at 20 to 24 minutes. They begin to open up. Does anybody else get a sulfury note, like a matchstick just being blown out? It has that quality, and sometimes that's a factor of youth. So the wine might get a little bit of SO2 gas before it's bottled, just to preserve it for transport and for stabilization of the wine. If you smell that, sometimes it's just a factor that it's in solution and it's more prominent. It hasn't kind of dissipated. Give it a swirl or two or 20 and see if some of that doesn't blow off. That funk, kind of that graphite, that matchstick. Adrian's picking up that matchstick. Robert is too. And of course, Chris, welcome aboard. Hi to Chris Pearman, who's saying more like a Maryland wine as opposed to a Virginia wine smell. There are some characteristic elements that you can place with place, but I think this smell is more about maybe just a little addition of that sort of sulfur as opposed to a signature of place. And it's pretty pronounced right now. I mean, my first sip had some of that there and then sort of dissipated over the course of the 15 minutes. I re-poured and it's still there. The funk is fresh bud. Nice. So there's a greenness to some of this too. We talked about this herbal quality. It is changing quite a bit, per Candy's note, that it's not just changing once and kind of leveling, it's changing a lot. It makes for a pretty intriguing wine. Candy's confused a touch too with respect to where the varietal might be placed. Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's difficult. This is not an easy wine to place. Hybrid? That would be fun. I've not tasted hybrids that have this sort of, I don't want to denigrate a hybrid, but in terms of hybrids, more about fruit than it is about that herbal element. But we could be tasting sort of an interesting hybrid that has, I think this is about winemaking. Like, I think there's a decision made with respect to whole cluster element to give you a little bit of lighter color and not quite the same extraction of fruit. Karen, I open, just so you all know, you can open them whenever you want. They're your wines, but I open them right before we begin. I mean, I open it, pour the glass, and then press go because I want it to be as close to the exact experience for anyone else who wants to have that. So I'm not telling you that you have to open it a half hour early. For those that do, or those that are opening it earlier, you're just kind of at an advanced state of where the wine might be by being open. Yeah, the funk definitely comes out. It's starting to blow off a little bit as I swirl it and as it's open a touch. And that funk is hard to, makes it hard to evaluate the wine, right? It doesn't give up as much in the way of the aroma. I think there's a profile here that starting to show a little bit like of almost kind of root beer barrel. Interesting. Touch of meatiness. And that takes me back to the old world. I know, Kenny, I think you said that you thought it might be more new world, but I think this is kind of presentation-wise giving you kind of an expression of the old world. I think that's where I would have to go. But we could have a producer in the new world, like you said, from a unique space that is playing in a way that is very old world in orientation. That acid, that tannin, the profile here, I don't know, it just doesn't scream New World. It's not quite as fruit forward as I would probably expect something to be from the New World. Although you can pick up some of that for sure from different producers, and per the kind of Virginia note, we could be. I think we find kind of a nice blend of both fruit and some of that earthy secondary characteristics, earthy characteristics. It's a really fascinating wine. Yeah. So let's go back to the deductive element, the deductive note we talked about. Wow, it makes you salivate so much I can have a hard time talking. Um, Hint of cherry, the meatiness, the old world kind of note from Kathy. Yeah. So what isn't it? And if we can take that away, that helps us to get to a place where we might have a better chance at least getting a right guess. I don't think this is, for example, Australian Shiraz. I don't think this is, for example, Cabernet or Petit Verdot or anything that's on the richer end of the spectrum. If it is those things, it's made in a really unique, interesting, different style that is very intentional and not typical. And in the blind tasting realm, it's not something that you want to kind of rely on an anomaly to make a guess unless you're kind of familiar with it. Chris, to your question about would I pour this by the glass at our restaurant? I think this might be a little bit. I would pour this by the glass as a part of a pairing for our present menu tasting, but probably not just as a glass pour. I think it has maybe a bit more of a polarizing profile to it. I like the wine. I think it's interesting. I like the texture of it and the lightness, but I don't think it gives kind of an easygoing profile to it. And that's sort of part of what we're looking for. We want wines with complexity and depth for our glass pours, but we also want them to have sort of, I want to have a second glass kind of pull to them. And have the ability for someone who doesn't want to necessarily start with a cocktail but wants to have a glass of wine to begin. Our glass pours have to have some versatility there where you can have them without food. And this is a wine that I think would be more geared toward some kind of pairing with food. Carmenere, nice, Sylvia. So that's an interesting thought. So Carmenere, I think we should be thinking about some kind of southern Rhone varietals, Provençal varietals. I like the sort of Sanso, Carignan, old vine Carignan kind of idea here. Let's try it again. Carmenere oftentimes though presents, it presents some of that herbal element. Pyrazine notes though, more bell pepper kind of quality. Carmenere could be cool here. You know, too, as it's been open, we're 28 minutes in, the first half, the front half of the wine has gotten bigger and has more volume, even more fruit, perhaps. The back half is where the acid and the tannin are at play. And like we said in the beginning, tannin's really, really fine. It's there. I can still feel it. There's a drying sensation, and it's definitely dancing with the acidity in the wine, creating a salivating experience that lasts for quite a while. But the finish of the wine is more about that tannin and that acidity and less about that fruit expression. So I'm thinking we're talking about a higher elevation site. We're talking about a cool vintage. We're talking about a place that can get ripeness, so maybe it gets some sunshine, but the expression of fruit is not there. That puts me more comfortably to your question, Adrian. I think it puts me more in the old world, which we've touched on again earlier. I think there's I'm working the next smells and the taste to try to think, if we're talking about old world and we're not talking about rich, robust wines, what are we talking about? And can we begin to maybe even regionally parse things out? We've talked quite a bit in the past about, you know what, this smells like and tastes like Italian wine. This smells like and tastes like a Spanish wine. This smells like and tastes like a French wine. And is this wine presenting in that way? And it's not particularly Italian, although it has the elements. Like if you just listen to the description, there's some elements that would make you think, say for example, Nebbiolo. It might be that on that side of things. Oh, fascinating, Candy. So, Kevin, you've tasted a cranberry wine once that had this profile. A fruit wine with cranberry. Cranberry is kind of present here. It's tart red, thanks to that acidity. But it doesn't present that way on the nose now. It's really in that herbal kind of herbal fruit, medicinal fruit. Fascinating. Taylor, you're not in the Italian or Spanish camp, so maybe the French camp, and maybe we're sort of borderlands, if you will, kind of hanging out, southern France. There's just a lot of that kind of sulfury element still that like weaves in and out of the notes. Karen, having this with chicken, that'd be fun. Like if you had Afghan chicken with sumac on it, you know, and a tangy kind of yogurty element and condiment there. You it could play with the acidity and things and a tang and a zing, little spritz of lemon. You know, if you're doing tandoor chicken or something like that from an Indian standpoint, that'd be fabulous. Hmm. Okay, I mean at this point, I'm kind of old world. I think some of you are too. The tannin, like sinewy tannin quality, I'm like a senso kind of Carignan, so Southern Rhone blend um, from a from a Languedoc kind of Roussillon sort of village. I think I could also see us in sort of maybe a cooler element in somewhere in Spain, but it doesn't have the kind of concentration of fruit that I would be looking for, the warmth that you'd be getting in Spain. So I'm going to say kind of an interesting, fun, unique Southern French blend with Carignan and Sanso. Maybe there's a little bit of Grenache, maybe there's a little bit of Syrah, but more about those varietals. So Candy's going to go with a new world production, but in a non-traditional area, which I think is cool. Sylvia, I don't think Mourvedre, I think would give us more concentration and power, more color. And I'm not getting it there. Karen, Greek-inspired chicken with lemon sounds delicious. Chicken and lemon from the Greek side of things is a gift to humanity. And I think the lemon element might be interesting to play with here, and the savory notes. All right. On the age side, we talked about it from the visual standpoint. I think there's advanced characteristics of that herbal element, but I don't think that's necessarily because of age. And I don't know that there's a lot of fruit here, and I'm not sure that's because we've lost that because of age either. Sometimes you don't get fruit in wine because the wine has been aged and some of that fruit has fallen out. There's no indication of sediment, but I didn't pour it all out. So I think this is a couple of years old in the sort of 2 to 4 year range. And it's a wine that I find, frankly, a little bit befuddling, which is kind of neat. So yeah, Robert, thank you for your note. Yeah, I feel very supported. Uh, we're doing this together, and we're in the same camp of sort of I'm stumped. Um, I'm throwing a dart at the board and saying, yeah, 2019 to your note, Candy, and a Carignan Sanso kind of wine from southern France, but I could very well be wrong. So. Um, Southern France. It's not Bordeaux to me. It's not Burgundy to me. It's not a proper Rhone site necessarily. It's not the Loire Valley and Cabernet Franc from up there. I think we'd get more pyrazine, a little more texture, a little more color. Um, so let's see. Seven Fuentes, Valle de la Orotava, excuse me, Orotava. So, where is this from? It's Spain. But where is Orotava? Tenerife. The alcohol is between 11 and 14%. that's fascinating. 2019, so we got the vintage right. I don't know much about this wine. We'll have to look it up. If someone can search that real quick, that'd be great. But Suertes del Marques, Tenerife is the grape. Tenerife, cool. Yeah, I see that there. Tenerife. I don't know nothing about that. That's neat. Yeah, Chris, maybe there's a poor vintage element here. Maybe that's just the varietal Tenerife, um, done as a kind of interesting presentation. Seven Fuentes. I recognize the producer. I don't remember what I've tried from them though before, um, and I don't know where this is coming from. It's super fair to be stumped by Tenerife. um, so we're on an island. Cool. That's very cool. Lisa Negro. Oh, thank you. Oh, okay. So in Mallorca? Hmm. Volcanic elements, the sulfury elements, the light profile, but with texture. Lisa Negro. Thank you very much. I know a little bit more about that. Um, a little bit. Very, very minimal. That's a neat wine. So, Lisa Negra. This is a neat wine. So yes, a grape varietal that has island orientation. They plant it in a very windy spots, right on volcanic soils. Um, Really cool wine. That's neat. But I don't know the alcohol. I mean, it says it here, of course, 11 to 14%. So it presents a little bit warmer, but I don't know. So think about that. Those conditions. If you're on an island, Canary Islands. I said Mallorca. Excuse me. Canary Islands. You're 100% right, Robert. Thank you. Um, um, you've got wind-swept spots, but sunshine. So you get relative ripeness, but you get some of this herbaceousness too. You don't get a lot of fruit production. You don't get you're protecting the fruit too from the sun and from the wind by way of kind of supporting the vines and letting there be a canopy, and so pretty dang cool wine. Wow, that's fun. How many times do you have to try wine from Canary Islands, especially blind? Um, we have no business getting this wine, and we didn't. But as was pointed out, we were spot on about the vintage. So well done, 2019. Tenerife. Yep. Very cool. Mm. I like that wine. And I like tasting it with you. Thanks, everybody. I wouldn't feel bad at all about not getting there. I mean, that's the part of the deductive process that gets us by, chipping away little bit by bit. We're not going to necessarily throw out Lista Negra as a varietal that we would typically look for, right? So, and when we talk about the old world, we generally are talking about kind of 4 places, 5 places. We're talking about France, Spain, Italy, Germany, and Austria. And in this case, an island spot is neat. And that helps once you know that then to explain a little bit about what we see and what we experience in the glass. Candy, we'll give you an extra point, sure, for noting that the Canary Islands is more New World than Old. And I absolutely second everybody's note about wanting to be on an island. That would be great. Just came back from there with a family vacation. It was wonderful. So back to islands. But you can join us on our little island here in Marshall at any point at Field and Main. We look forward to seeing all of you back at the restaurant. We have a series of events coming up, one each month by way of an actual in-person wine dinner here. We have Julie's made selections for February, March, April, and I think even into May. And so those are all available now for pickup if you want to have these wines going forward for the Thursday wine tastings. Wow. Lista Negra. Tenerife. Canary Islands. Cheers, everybody. Thanks very much. Appreciate you.